Civil rights activist Audre Lorde once said, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." The Baltimore-Washington Conference is one of the most diverse in the denomination, culturally, geographically, theologically, and economically. When people are asked what makes the Baltimore-Washington Conference special to them, 9 times out of 10, they'll name our diversity. Yet we have and continue to struggle to fully recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. One of the many struggles was and is recognizing the authority of women to lead and pastor.
From our very beginnings, Susanna Wesley, the mother of Methodism's founder John Wesley, and 18 other children, left a woman's fingerprints on the creation of Methodism. She taught and led prayers and worship for her children and neighbors around her kitchen table, and shaped the souls of those who led this movement called Methodism. From the beginning of my ministry, I purposed that I would not spend energy on justifying or defending my call. Instead, I have used moments of conflict as teaching moments. I have used these teaching moments as they arise to celebrate the inclusive gospel of Jesus Christ and the history of women in ministry in particular. From telling the story of biblical women in my authentic female voice to lifting up modern-day trailblazing women like Julia Foote, Jarena Lees, Zilpha Elah, Emma Burrell, Ianther Kelly, Mary Brown Oliver, and Vashti McKenzie. There are so many opportunities to do that through our preaching and teaching. Acts of forgiveness and reconciliation can readily be part of that experience.
We are both serving as the first women senior pastors in historic congregations in downtown DC, and we've experienced the joys and challenges of that great privilege. We're also among many women appointed as lead pastors in Baltimore-Washington Conference congregations. And while we celebrate the ways in which the BWC has embraced the equality of women throughout our history, every woman has her own story to tell about how sexism and patriarchy shows up.
Lay women and clergy women alike are familiar with negotiating double standards, hearing our ideas affirmed once they've been repeated by a man, getting more comments on what we're wearing than on what we have said or the leadership we've provided, and feeling like we're imagining something amiss in the gender dynamics around us. But we're not imagining anything. Both women and men will say and do things to women that they wouldn't do to men. Nothing is off limits. Our personal style, our preaching style, communication style, or our leadership style.
When I was introduced to my first congregation's SPRC in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, one guy decided that was the perfect time to explain to me just what the Bible had to say about women. It was classic. A decade later, in another congregation, a couple of years into deep culture change work, a key layperson made it clear he didn't think I had a clue about what I was doing. In that moment, I was reminded that women have to work overtime, sometimes for years, to get to what men receive upon arrival, the honor of being taken seriously.
The African American church has long been the sacred space of African American male dominion, the one place in society where the African American male has always been respected, especially pastors and leaders. And while this sacred space of male dominion is changing, it is still very much an expectation in the African American community that the lead pastor will be a man. This means the acceptance of women in ministry in lead positions is often challenged by both men and women. I have had laymen insist on referring to me as sister, sis, Ms., Mrs., instead of reverend. That would never happen with a male pastor in the African American church. Of course, that is unacceptable, and therefore, those have been moments to offer clarification. Teaching moments are powerful clarifiers. I'm reminded of my time as a district superintendent. It was an appointment transition where a female pastor was following a male pastor. The "This is your new pastor" meeting went very well. However, a day or so later, the SPRC chair called attempting to negotiate the salary down. I politely reminded the chair that the bishop and cabinet based salary on the gifts and graces required for the pastoral appointment. That is the grace and courage required to confront systemic injustice and move towards wholeness.
At every church I've served, it's only been a matter of time until the anxious and angry chatter gets back to me. Women are taking over the church. And you'd think those sorts of attitudes have become more rare, but even as recently as a couple of years ago, a member of my congregation shared her concern about a visit from some family members who she thought would be uncomfortable and angry about her wedding engagement to her female partner. But as it turned out, her family was prepared to deal with that issue. The thing they were really upset by was that Foundry was led by senior and executive pastors who were both women.
Often it is simply a matter of assuming the status quo of old paradigms. On one Sunday, the associate pastor, who was a provisional member, preached while I served as the worship leader in full clergy attire, wearing an elder stole, and a visiting proud United Methodist asked me if I was the lay leader. Over the years, I've had men and women tell me they do not believe in women pastors. At the same time, lay women have been my greatest supporters.
There will be times when our strength and clarity isn't praised as visionary leadership, as it would be for men, but is rather identified as bossiness, or another B word. There will be times when our compassion or desire to take time to develop relationships and build consensus will be characterized not as wise discernment and skilled community building, as it might be for men, but rather as weakness or lack of vision.
It has been difficult at times to navigate the waters of racism and sexism. There's always the question of which you are dealing with, and it is often difficult to distinguish. Early in my ministry, some racism and sexism was cloaked in my being too young to pastor a church. Other times, it's easier to tell which ism is in play.
I give thanks for what has been accomplished, but there is much work that remains to ensure that all women, that all people, are treated with dignity, respect, and equity. The work is both outward and inward. Throughout the Bible, in spite of cultural and religious barriers, women find a way to use their agency, gifts, and voice to participate in God's work in the world. From the mother of Moses to Miriam, from Naomi and Ruth to Esther, from Mary, the mother of Jesus, to Mary Magdalene, women are more than supporting players in the drama of salvation history. The stories of these women and many more inspire and encourage me as I seek to offer my gifts to God and to the church, and to use the privilege and power I have to participate in the work of bending the moral arc of the universe toward justice. There are always obstacles. Patriarchy persists. Old cultural habits and ways of thinking that would keep women sidelined are difficult to shake off. But God in Jesus Christ has broken down the walls that seek to exclude, diminish, or sideline anyone. Truly, as many of you as were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. These promises help me to be bold in both word and action for the sake of love and justice. The call of Jesus to humility and compassion is echoed in the words of Nelson Mandela, who said, "To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." As we as women become ever more liberated to claim our agency, gifts, and voices in leadership, we are called to do so in ways that encourage others along that same journey. The beautiful diversity of the Baltimore-Washington Conference offers all of us an opportunity to practice that vision, to encourage one another along the way, to participate in faith community that leads all toward wholeness and freedom.
We are the change we want to see. Change will happen as we fully embrace our calling and embrace our influence to be bridge builders and justice seekers. That means more than naming the biases, but also smoothing out the road and paving the way. We are still climbing. It's an upward journey, but thanks be to God, God's grace carries us.